Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow across Zach's bedroom. His heart raced as he stood before the full-length mirror, meticulously applying the final touches to his carefully crafted appearance. Today was graduation day, but for Zach, it represented so much more than just the culmination of his academic journey. His trembling fingers smoothed down the silky fabric of the dress he'd chosen for this momentous occasion. It was a deep navy blue, elegant and sophisticated, falling just below his knees. The color complemented his eyes perfectly, making them appear even more vibrant than usual. Zach took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He'd been planning this moment for months, agonizing over every detail. The dress, the makeup, the shoes. Everything had to be perfect. This wasn't just about cross-dressing. It was about revealing a part of himself he'd kept hidden for far too long. His parents' voices drifted up from downstairs, reminding him of the challenge that lay ahead. They were conservative, set in their ways, and Zach had always been their perfect son, captain of the debate team, straight-A student, and bound for an Ivy League college. How would they react to this side of him? "You can do this," he whispered to his reflection, straightening his posture and lifting his chin. The person staring back at him wasn't just Zach anymore. It was Zachary, a more refined and confident version of himself. With one last deep breath, he grabbed his graduation gown and cap, draping them over his arm. It was time to face the music. As he descended the stairs, each step felt like a milestone. The creaking of the old wooden steps seemed to echo his racing heartbeat. When he reached the bottom, he paused, gathering every ounce of courage he possessed. "Mom? Dad?" His voice wavered slightly as he called out, "In the kitchen, honey." His mother's cheerful reply came floating back to him. Zach closed his eyes for a moment, steeling himself. This was it. No turning back now. He walked towards the kitchen, his heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor. As he entered the room, time seemed to stand still. His parents, engrossed in their morning routines, looked up simultaneously. His father's coffee mug froze halfway to his lips, while his mother's hand hovered over the toast she'd been buttering. The silence that followed was deafening. I wanted to show you something," Zach began, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is a part of me I've been hiding for a long time." His mother was the first to find her voice. "Zach? What is this?" "It's still me, Mom," he replied, trying to keep his tone steady. "Just a different side of me. I like to dress up sometimes. It makes me feel complete." His father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "Is this some kind of joke? Because if it is, it's not funny, son." Zach shook his head, feeling a lump form in his throat. "No, Dad. It's not a joke. This is real. This is me." His mother's eyes were wide with confusion and concern. "But why? Are you gay?" "No, Mom. This isn't about sexuality. It's about self-expression. I'm still the same person you've always known. I like to explore different aspects of myself sometimes." His father pushed back from the table abruptly, the legs of his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I don't understand this. We didn't raise you to what, Dad?" Zach felt a flicker of defiance rising within him. "To be myself. To express who I am? This isn't you." His father's voice rose, filling the small kitchen. This is some kind of phase or rebellion or I don't know what." Zach's mother placed a hand on her husband's arm, trying to calm him. Let's just take a breath here. Zach, honey, can you explain this to us? When did this start? Zach's shoulders relaxed slightly at his mother's attempt to understand. He pulled out a chair and sat down, careful not to wrinkle his dress. It started a couple of years ago. I was helping with the school play, and I had to fill in for one of the female roles during rehearsal. When I put on the costume, it just felt right, like I was seeing a whole new side of myself for the first time. His father scoffed, but remained silent, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. After that, I started experimenting more. Zach continued. I'd borrow clothes from the drama department, try on makeup. It was like discovering a hidden talent. The more I explored it, the more I realized it was a part of who I am. His mother's brow furrowed. But why didn't you tell us? We're your parents, Zach. We love you. Zach felt tears pricking at the corners of his eyes. I was scared. I know how you feel about things that are different. I was afraid you'd reject me or try to change me. His father's voice was low and controlled when he finally spoke again. And what about your future? What about college? You can't show up to Harvard looking like this. Why not? Zach challenged, feeling a surge of confidence. This doesn't change who I am or what I can achieve. I'm still the same person who got accepted to Harvard. I'm still your son. A tense silence fell over the kitchen. Zach could see the conflicting emotions playing across his parents' faces. Confusion, fear, love, and uncertainty all battling for dominance. His mother was the first to break the silence. I don't understand this, Zach, but I love you. You're my child and nothing will ever change that. Zach felt a glimmer of hope at her words. Thanks, Mom. That means everything to me. His father, however, remained stoic. I need some time to process this. We should get ready for the ceremony. As his father stood up and left the room, Zach felt a mixture of relief and disappointment. It wasn't the acceptance he'd hoped for, but it wasn't outright rejection either. His mother reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Give him time, honey. This is a lot to take in. Zach nodded, blinking back tears. I know. I wanted to be honest with you both. Today is supposed to be about celebrating who I am and what I've achieved. I couldn't do that if I was hiding a part of myself. His mother managed a small smile. You've always been brave, Zach. This is just another example of that. Now, let's get you ready for your big day. As they prepared to leave for the graduation ceremony, the atmosphere in the house was thick with unspoken tension. Zach's father barely looked at him, focusing instead on gathering their belongings and ushering them out the door. The car ride to the school was silent, save for the low hum of the radio. Zach sat in the back seat, his graduation gown draped over his lap, hiding the dress underneath. He caught his father's eyes in the rearview mirror a few times, but they always quickly darted away. As they pulled into the school parking lot, Zach's mother turned to face him. Are you sure about this, honey? You know how people can be... Zach nodded, a determined set to his jaw. I'm sure, Mom. I'm done hiding. They made their way to the auditorium, joining the throng of excited graduates and proud families. Zach could feel the curious glances and whispered comments as he passed, his heels clicking against the polished floor. He held his head high, channeling every ounce of Zachary's confidence. As they reached the area where graduates were to line up, Zach turned to his parents. I have to go get in line now. I'll see you after the ceremony. His mother pulled him into a tight hug. We'll be right here, cheering you on. His father stood awkwardly for a moment before extending his hand. Good luck, son. Zach shook his father's hand, feeling a mix of emotions at the formal gesture. It wasn't the warm embrace he'd hoped for, but it was something. As he took his place in line with his fellow graduates, Zach could hear the murmurs and see the double takes. Some of his classmates stared openly, while others pointedly looked away. A few offered hesitant smiles of support. His best friend Mike sidled up next to him. "Dude, you look amazing! I can't believe you actually did it!" Zach grinned, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. "Thanks, man. I couldn't keep hiding, you know?" Mike nodded, giving him a supportive punch on the arm. "Well, you've got my support. And hey, if anyone gives you trouble, just remind them who's valedictorian." As the ceremony began and the graduates filed into the auditorium, Zach felt a mix of nerves and exhilaration. He scanned the crowd, quickly spotting his parents. His mother gave him a small wave, while his father sat stiffly beside her, his expression unreadable. The ceremony proceeded as expected. Speeches from the principal and guest speakers, the presentation of awards and honors. When it came time for Zach to deliver his valedictorian speech, he approached the podium with measured steps, conscious of every eye in the room upon him. He cleared his throat, looking out over the sea of faces. Fellow graduates, esteemed faculty, family, and friends. Today, we stand on the threshold of a new chapter in our lives. As he spoke, Zach felt a transformation taking place. The nerves melted away, replaced by a sense of purpose and pride. This was who he was, intelligent, articulate, and unafraid to be himself. The dress, the makeup, they were just another facet of his identity, no more defining than his academic achievements or his kindness. As we leave these halls today, let us carry with us not just the knowledge we've gained, but the courage to be true to ourselves. Our diversity is our strength, and our authenticity is our greatest asset. He caught his father's eye as he spoke these words, seeing a flicker of something understanding, perhaps, cross the older man's face. As Zach concluded his speech to enthusiastic applause, he felt a sense of triumph. He'd done it. He'd stood before his entire school, his family, his community, and shown them who he truly was. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur of names called and diplomas handed out. When Zach's name was announced, he strode across the stage with confidence, accepting his diploma with a bright smile. He could hear his mother's cheer from the audience, and, to his surprise, his father's deeper voice joining in. After the ceremony, as families and graduates mingled on the school lawn, Zach made his way through the crowd to find his parents. His mother engulfed him in a tight hug as soon as he reached them. "Oh, honey, your speech was wonderful! We're so proud of you!" Zach hugged her back, feeling tears prick at his eyes. "Thanks, Mom. That means a lot." He turned to his father, unsure of what to expect. To his surprise, his father pulled him into a gruff embrace. "You did good up there, son," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. I may not understand all this yet, but you're my kid, and I'm proud of you." Zach felt a sob catch in his throat. "Thanks, Dad. That means everything to me." As they stood there, a family unit weathering a storm of change, Zach knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more conversations, more explanations, more struggles ahead. But for now, in this moment, he was exactly who he wanted to be. Zach and Zachary, son and valedictorian, a young person on the brink of a future full of possibilities. The rest of the afternoon was a whirlwind of photographs, congratulations, and tearful goodbyes to classmates. Zach posed for pictures with his parents, his friends, his teachers. Some awkward, some joyful, all capturing this pivotal moment in his life. As the crowd began to thin, Zach's parents suggested they go out for a celebratory dinner. There was still an undercurrent of tension, particularly from his father, but the fact that they were willing to be seen in public with him, dressed as he was, felt like a significant step forward. They chose a small Italian restaurant just off the town square. As they were seated, Zach could feel the curious glances from other diners, but he held his head high. This was who he was, and he wasn't going to hide anymore. As they perused the menus, his mother broke the silence. "So, Zach? Or do you prefer Zachary when you're dressed like this?" Zach felt a rush of affection for his mother's attempt to understand. "Zach is fine, Mom. It's still me, just expressing myself differently." His father cleared his throat. "And how often do you do this?" "It varies," Zach replied honestly. "Sometimes it's just once in a while, when I'm feeling the need to express this side of myself. Other times I might go weeks or even months without feeling the urge." His father nodded slowly, clearly trying to process this information. "And at Harvard, do you plan to dress like this there?" Zach took a deep breath. This was the conversation he'd been both dreading and hoping for. "I'm not sure yet, Dad. I might. Harvard is known for being a pretty accepting place, but I promise you it won't interfere with my studies or my future plans." His mother reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "We know that, honey. You've always been so dedicated and hardworking. This doesn't change that." His father was quiet for a moment, then spoke in a low voice. I worry about you, son. The world can be a cruel place. I don't want to see you get hurt." Zach felt a lump form in his throat. "I know, Dad, and I appreciate that, but pretending to be someone I'm not. That hurts too. I'd rather face the world as my true self than hide away in fear." A look of understanding passed over his father's face. "You sound just like your grandfather, you know. He always used to say, 'Better to be hated for what you are than loved for what you're not.'" Zach smiled, feeling a connection to his family's past he hadn't expected. "I didn't know that about Grandpa." His father nodded, a distant look in his eyes. "He was a good man. Stubborn as hell, but good. He would have been proud of you today, Zach. Not just for your achievements, but for your courage." The rest of the dinner passed in a more relaxed atmosphere. They talked about Zach's plans for the summer, his upcoming move to Cambridge, and his hopes for his time at Harvard. His parents asked questions about his cross-dressing, some awkward, some insightful, but all coming from a place of genuine desire to understand. As they were finishing their dessert, Zach's father cleared his throat. "Son, I want you to know something. I may not understand all this yet, and it might take me some time to fully come to terms with it, but you're my child, and I love you. Nothing will ever change that." Zach felt tears welling up in his eyes. "Thanks, Dad. That means more to me than you know." His mother reached out and took both their hands. "We're a family. We'll figure this out together, just like we always have." As they left the restaurant, stepping out into the warm evening air, Zach felt a sense of peace settle over him. The day hadn't gone exactly as he'd imagined. It had been messier, more complicated, filled with more tears and tense silences than he'd hoped. But it had also been real, honest, and, ultimately, accepting. They walked together towards the car, a family changed, but not broken by the day's revelations. As they drove home, Zach looked out the window at the familiar streets of his hometown, knowing that when he left for college in a few months, he'd be leaving as his whole, authentic self. The future was uncertain, full of challenges and opportunities he couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time in years, Zach felt truly free. He was Zach and Zachary, son and scholar, a young person on the brink of adulthood with the world opening up before him. As they pulled into their driveway, his father turned to him. "So, Zach, tell me more about this play you were in, the one where all this started." Zach smiled, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. As they made their way into the house, he began to tell the story, his voice animated and free. It was a small step, but an important one. They were talking, they were listening, they were trying to understand. And for now, that was enough.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!